The city had a strange silence after the rain. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the heavy kind that comes when clouds still hang low, waiting to break again. The streets were a patchwork of puddles, brown water swirling over broken pavement. People hurried along, dodging the larger puddles, holding bags or coats over their heads as if the sky might start crying again any second. At the far end of a busy road, near the old bus stop that had no roof, an old man sat quietly on a crooked, wooden bench. His name was Mr. Rahman. To anyone passing, he looked like just another worn-out soul in the city, his shirt faded and patched in two places, the knees of his trousers thinned by years of use, and his slippers so flat they hardly clung to his feet. He held a small umbrella beside him, though it was broken, one of its ribs sticking out like a crooked finger. If you stopped to watch, you'd notice something different about him. He didn't slouch. He sat upright, hands resting calmly on his knees, his eyes moving slowly as if he was looking for something no one else could see. Every now and then, a child or a vendor would walk past, and he'd nod politely. That morning, the air was cold with the aftertaste of rain. Mr. Rahman had just helped a little boy cross the flooded street. The child's school bag was almost bigger than him, and his shoes had soaked through. The old man had smiled, told him to keep going, and returned to his bench without a word. A few minutes later, the sound of an engine broke the stillness. Low at first, then louder, then thunderous. A black luxury SUV turned the corner at an unnecessary speed. Its polished body reflected the gray sky like a moving mirror. As it approached the bus stop, it swerved to avoid a pothole, cutting right through a large puddle. The splash was instant and merciless. Cold, muddy water rose in a wave and crashed over Mr. Rahman from head to toe. The shock made him inhale sharply. The dirty water ran down his face, soaking his shirt until it clung to his thin frame. His slippers squelched under his feet. People at the nearby food stall gasped. One man cursed under his breath, but before anyone could call out, the SUV braked, a few meters ahead. Slowly, the tinted passenger window rolled down. A woman's voice, sharp, polished, and dripping with disdain, floated out. "You shouldn't be sitting so close to the road, old man," she said coldly. "This isn't your village." Her lipstick was a deep crimson, her sunglasses reflecting nothing but her own face. She didn't wait for a reply. The window rolled up, and the SUV glided forward, disappearing into the traffic. For a moment, no one spoke. It was as if the insult had splashed over everyone, not just him. "That's shameful," a vendor muttered. "Couldn't even say sorry," another woman added. "Mr. Rahman's always helping people. How could she—" Someone else began, but stopped when the old man raised his hand gently. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice steady. "Let God judge, not us." The crowd fell silent again, some shaking their heads, others muttering as they returned to their business. But one young woman didn't move. She was standing at the small tea stall beside the bus stop, her hands still gripping the kettle she'd been using to pour chai into paper cups. Her name was Aisha. She was no stranger to seeing the rich mistreat the poor. She had seen it too many times in her life. But something about the way the old man sat there, calm despite being soaked and humiliated, made her chest tighten. Setting the kettle down, she grabbed a clean towel from the shelf and walked toward him. "Uncle here," she said gently, offering the towel. He looked up, surprised, then accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you, my daughter," he murmured, dabbing his face. "Your clothes," she began, but he waved it off. "They will dry. It's only water." Still, she couldn't walk away. "Please come to the stall, sit near the stove, you'll catch a cold." Reluctantly, he followed. The little tea stall was just a wooden counter under a sheet of corrugated metal, with 3 small benches for customers. The warm air from the boiling kettles wrapped around them. Aisha poured him a steaming cup of chai, added extra sugar without, asking, and set it in front of him. He accepted it with both hands, inhaling the aroma before taking a slow sip. "This is good tea," he said quietly. "Better than the expensive ones I've tasted." She smiled faintly. "That's because I make it with patience, not hurry." They sat in silence for a while. Rainwater still dripped from the edges of the stall's roof. Somewhere across the road, a vendor's radio played an old song. Finally, he asked, "You run this stall alone?" She nodded. "Since my parents died, yes. I take care of my younger brother and sister. They're still in school. I sell tea in the mornings, help a tailor in the afternoons, and sometimes sew at night if I have orders." "You work a lot," he observed. She shrugged. "If I don't, no one else will. My dream is to open my own tailoring shop one day. But dreams are expensive." He studied her face quietly, the determination in her eyes, the faint tiredness in her expression. "You speak with strength," he said finally. She laughed softly. "Strength and tiredness are cousins, Uncle. They live together." The old man smiled at her words, tucking them away in his heart. What Aisha didn't know, what no one at that bus stop knew, was that Mr. Rahman was not a poor old man with nothing to his name. He lived in a grand home on the other side of the city. His son, Imran, owned a successful chain of businesses. But Imran had sworn never to marry, convinced that all women were only interested in his wealth. Mr. Rahman had made up his mind months ago. He would disguise himself as a man with nothing and search the city for a woman whose kindness was not for sale. That was why he sat at bus stops, drank tea at roadside stalls, and watched people more closely than they realized. And now, as he watched Aisha pour tea for another customer, he wondered if the search was over. The rain started again, light, but steady, tapping on the metal roof. Aisha glanced at him. "Stay until it stops, Uncle. No rush." Mr. Rahman nodded, but inside, his thoughts were already far ahead. Maybe, he thought, this is the woman who can teach my son to believe again. The rain had stopped by the time Mr. Rahman returned home that evening, but the smell of wet earth still clung to the air. His mansion stood at the far end of a quiet, tree-lined street, its white walls and tall iron gates almost hiding the warmth inside. A soft yellow glow leaked from the windows, and the faint hum of the generator filled the silence. Inside, the living room looked like something from a luxury magazine. The sofas were deep and soft, the curtains heavy and gold-trimmed, and the polished marble floor reflected the chandelier's light in a dozen tiny suns. But to Mr. Rahman, the house was not a symbol of pride. It was a place of memories, a place that still carried the echo of his late wife's laughter. He walked in slowly, still in the same old clothes from the bus stop. A little trail of dried mud followed him across the floor. From the corner of the room, a voice spoke without looking up. "Papa, again?" Mr. Rahman turned toward the sound. His son Imran sat on the long gray sofa, one leg crossed over the other, scrolling through his laptop. He was dressed casually in a white shirt and dark trousers. But even in casual clothes, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man used to making decisions. "Again what, my son?" Mr. Rahman asked, lowering himself into a chair. Imran finally looked up, his eyes falling on his father's damp shirt and frayed slippers. "You've been out in those clothes again. Papa, why do you keep doing this?" Mr. Rahman smiled faintly. "Because there's more to life outside these walls than marble floors and glass windows." Imran sighed, shutting his laptop. "You don't need to go wandering in the rain, sitting at bus stops like you have nothing. You've worked your whole life. You deserve comfort." "I am comfortable," Mr. Rahman replied. "But comfort is not the same as purpose." Imran rubbed his forehead, a familiar look of frustration settling on his face. "Papa, we've talked about this. You don't have to mingle with strangers like that. Some of them could be dangerous. And honestly, he hesitated. It's not a good look for the family. Mr. Rahman's smile faded slightly. Ah, the look of the family. Is that all that matters to you? It matters, Imran said carefully. Especially in my position. People judge. And you know I've had enough gossip in my life already. The old man leaned back, studying his son's face. This is not about gossip, Imran. This is about the fact that you are 35 years old and you have no wife, no family of your own. Imran's eyes darkened. Papa. No, Mr. Rahman interrupted gently but firmly. Let me speak. Your mother's dying wish was to see you settled. You promised me you would try. But every time I mention it, you find a reason to avoid it. Imran stood up, walking toward the window. Outside, the wet streetlights flickered in the mist. Because I've seen what marriage can do when it's built on the wrong reasons, he said quietly. I've seen women who smile until the ring is on their finger and then their true face comes out. I've seen men lose everything because they chose the wrong person to trust. I won't make that mistake. Mr. Rahman's gaze softened. He knew exactly what his son was thinking about. The broken engagement 3 years ago. The woman Imran had once loved, who had left him overnight for another man with a bigger house and a flashier car. The betrayal had cut deeper than Imran admitted, and the wound had not healed. You think I don't understand? Mr. Rahman said quietly. You think I haven't seen both kinds of women? The ones who will stand with you in the mud, and the ones who will leave you for shinier shoes. I know the difference. That is why I go out there, Imran, to find the one who will stand with you, in sunshine and in storms. Imran turned slowly, his expression caught between disbelief and concern. You're looking for someone for me? Papa, this isn't the old days. You can't just find a wife for your son like buying fruit at the market. Mr. Rahman chuckled softly. It's not about finding a wife like fruit. It's about finding the truth in a person's heart before you see their face in a wedding photograph. And you think you can do that by pretending to be poor? Imran asked. Yes, Mr. Rahman said simply, because when people think you have nothing, they show you who they really are. Kindness to the rich is easy. Respect for the poor is rare. Imran shook his head. Papa, this is risky. You could get hurt out there. Mr. Rahman leaned forward, his voice calm but unshakable. I've already been hurt in this life, my son. Hurt is not what I fear. What I fear is seeing you grow old in this house, surrounded by everything except love. The words landed heavily between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the slow ticking of the old wall clock. Finally, Mr. Rahman changed the subject, at least on the surface. I met someone today, he said, almost casually. Imran looked over, raising an eyebrow. Someone? Yes, a young woman. She runs a tea stall near the bus stop. Imran smirked faintly. Papa, please tell me you're not trying to set me up with someone you just met on the roadside. I am not setting you up, Mr. Rahman replied, the corners of his mouth lifting. I am telling you that she is different. She works hard. She cares for her younger siblings. She has dreams, but she does not complain about her struggles. And today she was kind to me when others stayed silent. Imran folded his arms. Kindness is good, but you can't know someone's whole character from one meeting. Mr. Rahman's smile deepened. That's why I will see her again. And again, until I know. And when I am sure, I will bring her to meet you. Imran's eyes narrowed slightly. You're serious, aren't you? Very. Imran let out a slow breath, walking back toward the sofa. Fine, but don't expect me to be charmed just because you think she's perfect. If I meet her, I'll judge for myself. That's all I ask, Mr. Rahman said, leaning back. Judge for yourself, but keep your eyes open. And your heart, too. The conversation drifted after that, but the old man's mind did not. As Imran went upstairs to his room, Mr. Rahman sat alone in the living room, his tea untouched. His thoughts were not on the mansion or the business his son managed. They were on a small wooden tea stall, a broken umbrella, and a young woman whose eyes held more strength than she realized. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Imran's walls were high, built from years of distrust. But Mr. Rahman also knew something else. Sometimes, the right person didn't just climb those walls. They made you want to take them down yourself. And as the night deepened, the old man made himself a silent promise. He would see Aisha again. And one day soon, his son would, too. 2 days later, the city was awake earlier than usual. The sun had come out strong after the rain, drying the streets in a hurry, but the air still smelled faintly of wet dust. People moved like rivers in different directions. Office workers, clutching briefcases, school children in crisp uniforms, vendors pushing carts piled with vegetables. At the edge of a crowded crossroad, the little tea stall stood as it always did, with its uneven wooden counter and the soft hiss of boiling water. Aisha was already there, hair tied back neatly, sleeves rolled up, moving quickly between serving cups of tea, counting change, and keeping an eye on her younger brother, who had come to help before heading to school. It was mid-morning when Mr. Rahman arrived. Today, he wore a faded gray shirt and trousers that had clearly been mended more than once. His slippers looked older than the road itself. To anyone watching, he blended perfectly into the crowd of ordinary men. But his eyes were searching. He took a seat on the bench outside the stall, quietly watching Aisha work. There was no sign of weariness in her voice despite the rush of customers. She smiled at each person, addressed them politely, and even added an extra splash of milk for an old regular who looked like he hadn't eaten since yesterday. When she finally noticed him, her face brightened just slightly. "Uncle," she greeted warmly, "you came back." "I said I would," he replied, smiling faintly. "Tea?" she asked, already reaching for a cup. "Yes, and maybe a story, if you have one." She chuckled softly. "My stories are free, but my tea you'll have to pay for." He liked that about her, the way she didn't let kindness be confused with charity. He paid, she served, and they sat for a while, exchanging small talk. But as the crowd around the stall thinned, a different kind of sound cut through the air, the purr of an expensive car engine. From the far side of the road, a sleek silver sedan rolled into view. Its windows were tinted, but the sound of its horn was sharp and impatient. The driver pulled up in front of the tailor's shop next to the tea stall, blocking half the road. The door swung open and Sarah stepped out. She was the kind of woman who never blended into any scene. Everything about her was designed to be noticed. Her heels clicked on the pavement like a metronome of confidence. Her dress, deep emerald green, shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and her expression icy. She glanced around with mild disinterest until her eyes landed on Mr. Rahman. A slow smirk formed on her lips. "You again?" she said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. Mr. Rahman looked up but said nothing. Sarah took a step closer, tilting her head. "Still sitting around doing nothing, old man? Haven't you found a proper corner to waste your days in?" Aisha froze mid-step, her hands tightening around the tray she was carrying. She turned slowly. Sarah continued, her voice laced with mockery. "You know, people like you make this city ugly. Always hanging around, making places look poor. No wonder—" "That's enough." The words were calm but firm. They came from Aisha, who was now standing between Sarah and Mr. Rahman. Sarah arched an eyebrow. "And who are you?" "His Granddaughter? Or maybe his business manager? She laughed at her own joke. Aisha didn't flinch. I'm someone who knows how to speak to an elder with respect. Something you clearly don't. A few people nearby paused, sensing trouble. Sarah's smirk deepened. Respect? For this? He's just a useless old man taking up space. Why should anyone respect that? Because he's a human being, Aisha replied without raising her voice. And because the way you treat people who have nothing says everything about who you are. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You have a sharp tongue for someone selling tea on the roadside. And you have a loud voice for someone with so little to say, Aisha shot back. Her tone wasn't rude, but the words carried weight. The air between them tightened like a rope pulled too far. Then Sarah scoffed, flicked her hair back, and muttered, This whole area stinks of cheap chai and bad choices. She turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking away like a drum beat of retreat. The sedan's door shut with a thud, and the car pulled away, leaving the street a little quieter. Aisha turned back to Mr. Rahman. Uncle, are you all right? He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. Better than all right, my daughter. Thank you. You shouldn't let people talk to you like that, she said softly. He smiled faintly. And you shouldn't waste your fire on people who don't feel the heat. But still, thank you. For the rest of the morning, Aisha worked as if nothing had happened, but Mr. Rahman sat quietly, his mind already turning over what he'd seen. That sharpness in her, not just the courage to stand up for someone, but the wisdom to do it without losing dignity, was rare. By the time he left the stall, he had decided something. It was time to bring her and Imran into the same circle, without either of them knowing it was planned. That same afternoon, in a different part of the city, Imran was seated at a polished wooden desk in his office, surrounded by files and a faint smell of fresh coffee. He had just finished a meeting when his phone buzzed with a message from his father. Meet me tomorrow at the old community hall. Noon. Trust me. Imran frowned. The old community hall was where his father sometimes volunteered during charity events, distributing food to the homeless. Why was he asking him to come there? Still, curiosity and a reluctant respect for his father's strange instincts made him agree. What Imran didn't know was that across the city, Aisha had received a similar request from Mr. Rahman. There's a charity kitchen at the old D. Community hall tomorrow. They need extra hands. Can you come? And so, by the will of one determined old man, two people's paths were set to cross in the most unexpected way. The old community hall stood at the corner of a busy intersection, its paint faded from years of sun and rain. Once it had been a place for weddings, school functions, and city meetings. Now, twice a week, it served a very different purpose. A charity kitchen for anyone who needed a warm meal. By late morning, the hall was already buzzing. Volunteers moved in and out of the wide double doors, carrying trays of rice, steaming pots of lentils, and baskets of bread. The scent of fresh spices floated out into the street, mingling with the faint mustiness of the old building. Inside, the long tables were lined with metal plates, the chairs mismatched but clean. Children laughed in one corner while their mothers tried to quiet them. Old men sat in groups, talking in low voices. Aisha arrived early, as she always did when asked to help. She wore a simple blue salwar kameez, her hair neatly tied, and an apron over her clothes. Her sleeves were already rolled up as she set to work, helping to arrange plates and cutlery. Mr. Rahman was there too, dressed once again in his humble disguise. Plain shirt, old slippers, nothing that hinted at the mansion he would return to later. He worked beside Aisha, ladling soup into large containers, smiling at the other volunteers, but he was also watching the clock. And when it struck noon, he glanced toward the doors just in time to see his son walk in. Imran paused at the entrance, letting his eyes adjust to the dimmer light inside. He was dressed casually, dark jeans, a cream shirt, and no sign of the tailored suits he wore at work. Even so, he stood out. His posture, his clean-cut look, and the quiet confidence in his step made people turn their heads. Aisha noticed him almost immediately. Not because he looked wealthy. He didn't. Not because he was handsome, though he was. But because there was something in his expression, a mix of curiosity and distance, like someone standing at the edge of a party unsure whether to step in. Mr. Rahman walked over, pretending surprise. "Ah, Imran, you came." "You told me." "Too," Imran replied with a faint smile. Yes, good. Come, we need more hands in the serving line." Imran glanced around. "This is busier than I expected." "It always is," Mr. Rahman said, leading him toward the long table where Aisha was setting out bowls of fruit. "Ah, Aisha, meet my friend Imran. He's here to help today." Aisha looked up, her eyes meeting Imran's. For a moment, they both stood still like they were trying to place each other. Then Aisha offered a small, polite smile. "Welcome." "Thank you," Imran said, his voice steady but softer than he expected it to be. Mr. Rahman watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. He didn't say more, just handed Imran an apron and moved away, leaving them side by side in the line. They worked together for the next hour, passing plates down the row, refilling trays when they emptied. At first, their conversation was minimal, short, polite exchanges about where the extra bread was kept or how many spoons were left. But slowly, the silence between them began to loosen. "So," Aisha asked quietly as they worked, "do you volunteer here often?" Imran shook his head. "First time," she smiled faintly. "You don't look like the kind of person who's afraid to get his hands dirty." "I'm not," he said honestly. "I just don't usually get the chance." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment. There was no judgment in them, only curiosity. "Then maybe today's a good place to start." Before Imran could reply, the air in the room shifted. The sound of high heels clicking against the tile cut through the background noise. A few heads turned. Sarah had arrived. She was dressed for anything but charity work, a fitted red dress, glossy heels, and a designer bag hanging from her arm. She walked in as if the hall was her runway, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Imran. "There you are," she said loudly, striding toward him. "I've been calling you." "Why? Haven't you answered?" Imran set down the ladle he was holding. "Sarah, this isn't—" She cut him off with a wave of her manicured hand. "You didn't tell me you were here doing this." Her eyes flicked to Aisha, scanning her from head to toe in a glance. That was sharper than any blade. Aisha stood still, her chin lifting slightly. "And you are?" Sarah asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "A volunteer," Aisha replied simply. Sarah gave a short laugh. "Of course, a volunteer. How noble." The way she said it made it sound like an insult. "Sarah," Imran said quietly, "we're in the middle of serving food. Can we—" But Sarah wasn't listening. She took a small step closer to Aisha, her voice lowering but still audible to those nearby. "You know, dear, there are better ways to meet men than ladling soup in a community hall." A hush spread over the few volunteers close enough to hear. Aisha didn't respond immediately. She looked at Sarah calmly, as if weighing her words. "And there are better ways to show wealth than wearing it like armor," she said finally. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Aisha's tone remained polite. "If you want people to believe you're truly rich, show them generosity, not just jewelry." Imran's eyes shifted from one woman to the other, his jaw tightening. "Sarah, that's enough." But Sarah wasn't done. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. "Well, let me tell you. Women like you stand here and feed the hungry while women like you interrupt them." Aisha's voice was still calm, but there was steel in it now. Sarah's face flushed, her lips pressing into a thin line. She glanced at Imran, clearly expecting him to defend her. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent. With a sharp turn, Sarah strode toward the door, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. "We'll talk later," she threw over her shoulder at Imran. When she was gone, the room seemed to exhale. Aisha picked up the ladle again and returned to serving as if nothing had happened. Imran watched her for a moment before speaking. "You didn't have to say all that." "Yes," she replied simply. "I did." He didn't know why, but the certainty in her voice made him want to know more about her. From across the room, Mr. Rahman had seen it all, and though his face was unreadable, his mind was already made up. This was the woman who could challenge his son and protect him. The day after the incident at the charity kitchen, the city's heat returned with a vengeance. By late afternoon, even the shade seemed to sweat. The air shimmered above the asphalt, and people moved slower, their clothes sticking to their skin. Kiekin, a quiet cafe on the upper floor of a luxury mall, Sarah sat alone at a corner table, tapping her manicured nails against her phone screen. The ice in her glass had already melted, but she barely touched the drink. Her mind was replaying the scene from the day before, Imran's silence, Aisha's calm replies, and the faint murmur of people in the hall siding with that T-girl. It was more than humiliation. It was insult. And Sarah had never been the kind of woman to forgive either. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a number saved simply as Farid. He wasn't a friend, not in the normal sense. Farid was a man who solved problems for a price. Rumors said he once worked security for some powerful people, but Sarah didn't care about his resume. She cared about results. She called. "Madam Sarah," came the deep voice on the other end. "I need something handled," she said, lowering her voice so no one nearby could overhear. "There's a girl, works at a roadside tea stall. She thinks she can humiliate me in front of Imran. I want her ruined." There was a pause. "Ruined how?" Sarah's lips curved slightly. "Start with her livelihood. The stall, her supplies, her name, destroy them. Make her so desperate she disappears. And while you're at it—" She hesitated, the smile turning colder. "Find a way to make Imran regret ever standing near her." Farid chuckled darkly. "You want her gone?" "I want her erased," Sarah replied. "No sympathy, no second chances. I'll pay double if it's quick." "Consider it done," Farid said, ending the call. Sarah leaned back, satisfaction settling over her like a silk shawl. She imagined Imran coming back to her, realizing Aisha was nothing but a mistake. In her mind, the ending was already written. Next morning at the tea stall, Aisha noticed something unusual. A man she didn't recognize stood a few feet away, pretending to buy cigarettes from the kiosk but watching her closely. His clothes were plain, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every detail. She brushed it off at first. In the market, strangers came and went all the time. But when she turned to hand a cup of tea to a customer, she saw another man. This one lingering by the corner, looking directly at the small crate where she kept her week's supply of milk and sugar. Something in her chest tightened. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and right now they told her something wasn't right. Within minutes, both men walked off, disappearing into the crowd. By afternoon, the trouble began. Her main supplier arrived late, saying someone had called claiming she was moving away and no longer needed his deliveries. Confused, Aisha reassured him, but when she went to the back of the stall, she found the sugar crate missing. It wasn't much by rich people's standards, but to her, it was everything she'd saved for the week. She stood there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it when a familiar voice came from behind. "Trouble?" She turned to see Mr. Rahman approaching, his expression calm, but his eyes alert. "Someone's trying to mess with my stall," Aisha said quietly. "First my supplier gets false calls, Now my stock is gone. Mr. Rahman's brows knit together. Who would do such a thing? She shook her head. I don't know. But it feels deliberate. Before he could reply, another figure stepped out from the side street. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a faded jacket. His face carried a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle. Miss Aisha? He asked. Yes? My name's Bilal. I used to work with someone who's trying to hurt you. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? Bilal glanced around before stepping closer. I was hired by a woman named Sarah. She wanted me to sabotage your stall, scare you away from here? Said you embarrassed her in front of a man named Imran. Aisha's jaw tightened, but she stayed quiet. I don't do that kind of work anymore, Bilal continued. Not after what Imran did for me years ago. My sister was in trouble, and he helped her when no one else would. I owe him. So instead of hurting you, I'm warning you. Mr. Rahman's eyes sharpened. What exactly did Sarah say? Bilal hesitated. She said you're a problem that needs to disappear. She wants you ruined, your name blackened, so Imran walks away from you. The old man's gaze darkened. I see. Aisha felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. Fear, because someone wanted to destroy her for something so small. Resolve, because she would not let them win. Thank you for telling me, she said to Bilal. He nodded. Be careful. She's not the type to give up if she fails once. As Bilal walked away, Mr. Rahman turned to Aisha, his voice low but steady. My daughter, let me handle this. Some fights are not worth you standing in the line of fire. But Aisha met his gaze without flinching. If I run now, she'll think I can be pushed, and then she'll push again. Mr. Rahman looked at her for a long moment. Behind her calm eyes, he saw the same unshakable spirit that had first caught his attention. All right, he said finally. But if she comes again, she won't be facing you alone. Neither of them knew it yet, but Sarah's plans were already beginning to unravel, and the moment of truth was closer than any of them expected. The days that followed were tense. Aisha worked at her stall as usual, but she could feel eyes on her, strangers lingering a little too long, whispers that stopped when she turned her head. Mr. Rahman visited more often, sometimes sitting, quietly in the corner, other times helping serve tea just to be near in case trouble came. But nothing happened for 2 days. On the third morning, the storm broke. It started with a police van pulling up beside the tea stall. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions cold. Are you Aisha? One of them asked. Yes, she replied cautiously. You're under investigation for selling expired milk and using unsafe water. We've had complaints, the officer said. A small crowd began to form. Aisha's heart raced. That's not true. My supplies are clean. Who complained? That's not for you to know right now, the officer replied, reaching for one of her milk containers. Before Aisha could say another word, a familiar voice cut in from behind. I complained, a woman announced. The crowd parted and Sarah appeared, her red dress catching the sunlight like a warning flag. Her lips curved into a satisfied smile. It's a shame, really. So many people trusting you, and all this time you've been serving poison. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. That's a lie, Aisha said, her voice steady but fierce. Sarah shrugged. We'll let the authorities decide. She turned to the officers. You should shut this stall down immediately before anyone else gets sick. The officers exchanged glances. One of them was about to speak when another voice, deep, firm, and commanding, rang out. No one is shutting anything down. Heads turned. Imran was walking toward them, his steps calm but deliberate. He wore no suit today, just a plain shirt and trousers, but his presence was enough to quiet the murmurs. Sarah blinked in surprise. "Imran? What are you—" He ignored her, turning to the officers. "Do you have proof of these complaints?" The senior officer hesitated. "We received an anonymous tip, sir." Imran's eyes hardened. "Anonymous tips don't close businesses, especially when I have the actual health inspection reports for this stall, signed and stamped just last week. Clean water, safe storage, no violations." He pulled a folder from under his arm and handed it over. The officer scanned the papers quickly, his brow furrowing. Sarah's smile faltered. "Where did you—" Imran finally looked at her. "From the truth. Something you've been avoiding for a long time." Before she could respond, another figure stepped forward from the back of the crowd. It was Bilal, the scar-faced man who had warned Aisha earlier. In his hand was a small recorder. "This," he said loudly, "is what happens when you hire the wrong people to do your dirty work." He pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the air, unmistakable and dripping with malice. "Destroy her stall. Make her disappear. Make him regret ever standing near her." Gasps turned into angry murmurs. The officers exchanged looks, their expressions shifting from suspicion to grim understanding. Sarah's face drained of color. "That's not— I was angry, I didn't mean—" Mr. Rahman, who had been standing quietly until now, stepped forward. "The words we speak when we're angry are often the truest mirror of our hearts," he said softly. Sarah's eyes darted to him, and then widened in shock. "You—" "Yes," Mr. Rahman replied evenly. "The old man from the roadside, the one you splashed with muddy water, the one you insulted. Twice." The crowd was silent, waiting. "And," Imran added, stepping closer to Aisha, "my father." The truth hit like a wave. Sarah's lips trembled. I didn't know—" "That's the point," Mr. Rahman said, his voice firm. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. And because you couldn't do that, you have nothing left to say here." Sarah looked around, as if searching for someone to save her. But the crowd's eyes were cold now. Even the officers had stepped back, their job now clearly aimed in her direction. Within minutes, they were escorting her to the police van. This time, not because of a fake complaint, but for charges of harassment and malicious intent backed by a recorded confession. When the van pulled away, the street felt lighter. Aisha exhaled slowly, looking from Mr. Rahman to Imran. You're his son?" she asked, her voice still a little shaky. Imran nodded. "And you're the woman my father has been talking about for weeks." Her eyes widened. "Wait, so this was all—" Mr. Rahman smiled gently. "I needed to see how you treated people you thought had nothing. I didn't tell you who I was because real character isn't shown when you know someone's rich. It's shown when you think they can give you nothing." Aisha's throat tightened, emotion swelling. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now," Imran said, stepping closer, "I know I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Her breath caught. "I'm not saying this because of today or because you defended my father," he continued. "I'm saying it because I've watched you work. I've seen your kindness, your strength. And I know my father is right. You're different. You're the one I've been waiting for without even realizing it." The noise of the market faded for her. All she could hear was the sincerity in his voice. "I don't have much," she whispered. Imran shook his head. "You have everything that matters. The rest, we can build together." Mr. Rahman smiled, a warmth in his eyes that had been missing for years. "My son," he said quietly. "Your mother would have been proud of this day." A week later, the tea stall stood open again, busier than ever, customers drawn not only by the tea, but by the story that had spread through the city. That evening, Aisha's younger siblings arrived from their village, shy but wide-eyed as they stepped into a new home Imran had prepared for them. It wasn't long before wedding preparations began. The ceremony was small but beautiful, filled with laughter, tears, and the scent of fresh flowers. And as Aisha and Imran stood side by side, Mr. Rahman watched from the front row, his heart at peace. He had pretended to be a poor beggar to find the truth, and in doing so, he had not only found a wife for his son, he had found someone who would guard his family's heart as fiercely as her own. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Mr. Rahman closed his eyes for a moment and whispered a prayer of thanks, because in a world where pride spoke louder than kindness, he had seen with his own eyes that humility still had the power to win.